As we completed the build at the end of part 2, here's how our color picker app is functioning with one switch. All right, we're ready to begin part 3. And you can see that we're going to be adding additional switches. Command D to duplicate our switches. Bring up the storyboard. Command D. Command D to duplicate that again so that we have 3 switches. Whoops. Over here, I want to put my view controller. And since we're going to be adding additional switches, I want to make some room in the code to drag those out and create those outlets. I'm going to hold down my control key and drag. And this is going to be an outlet. It is going to be a UI switch, and we will call this red switch. I'll click on this one, hold down the control key while I drag. We want this to be an outlet, and I will call it green switch. And finally, the last one, hold down the control key and drag. This will be an outlet. And I will call it blue switch. The image below shows all the outlets and actions the selected switch is connected to. All right. Let's go and see if these are connected. Looks good for my first switch. Click on the second switch. Go look at the connections. And finally, the blue switch. All right. That's encouraging. Follow these steps to learn another way to connect actions. Okay, since ours passed the test, that's not something that we have to look about an alternate way. Updating your code. Now that you've created the user interface and connected all the outlets and actions, it's time to write the code. There's already some repeated code in the file. The color is set to black and view did load, and then the switch is turned off. A better design is to have a single function that makes the correct color based on the state of the switch, and to call this from the action method and from view load. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to do a Command C to copy that. Come over here and do a Command V to paste that. To update the action method to call this new function, remove the code that was setting the color and replace it with a single line. So we will replace, the line is update color. Copy that, and we will replace line 32 in view did load with update color, and also in our switch change we will update that. So we will remove the if else logic and call that new function. And now we want to do a build again. By switching the switches off and on, it mixes the color. But if you switch on one switch at a time, then you can see what color that switch is in of itself. But switching on multiple switches starts to mix the colors. Okay, we're ready to add our sliders for part 4. First, we need to make some room for the sliders. So we have our buttons that we need to move over so that we can make room for our sliders on the right-hand side of our app. So we can drag them all together. Okay, and then it's having us spread the buttons further apart. I don't think that's a problem right now. We'll see if that develops into... Oh, it says because if you're using a device with your finger, you'd need more room to move around the interfaces. So I'll create a little bit more room as requested between my buttons. So we want to go get a slider in our object library. We go under View, Show Library, and we want a slider. And again, we're going to drag and drop that out onto our view controller. And we can drag and drop a new one, or we can just do a Command D to copy. Let's see what the... Okay, so View, Show Library, drag up another slider, View, Show Library, drag up another slider. So we have to go get that, and let me go back and see which one So they are in that mode on the attribute selector. So I have my selector. Okay. So this is the attribute inspector. So we want to set that to 1. Whoops. Boy, I can't do it with, I'll just have to type it in. 1. I think they wanted 101. 101. 101. And I'll make sure that for each of the sliders, those are all consistent. 101. Follow these steps to create new outlets for the sliders. So let's create outlets for each of the sliders we just created. I'm going to make some more room. But before I do that, I want to be on my view controller. Now I will close that. And I'm going to go up here and add some space. Hold down the control key. Let me remind myself, these are supposed to be red slider, green slider, and blue slider. Red slider, okay. Hold down the control key, drag. It's supposed to be an outlet, and we want it to be red slider. Hold down the control key and drag. And this should be green slider. Make some more space. We'll just keep them in the same order as our switches. Hold down the control key and drag. This is an outlet for blue slider. Okay, so we've completed page 332. Control drag from the top slider into the file to create an action called slider changed. Okay. Control drag. We want an action, and it's supposed to be called slider changed. And I think that should be UI slider. So it's an action, slider changed, connect. And then I believe they demonstrate dragging that function to each of the other, drag to each of the other sliders. Drag from the circle icon in the gutter to each of the other 2 sliders so that all sliders are connected to the same action. So that's what we just did. Okay. Okay, so let's go and drag that to the green slider. And whoops, and drag that to the blue slider. So now we should be able to see that action is associated with each of our sliders. Okay. So it wants us to call from that action as well the update color. So the same thing that we have here, we will put into this new action that we just created. So we need to go and update the color. The update color method needs updated. Currently it sets the value of each color component to 1 if the switch is on. You'll need to use the value property of each slider, which is set to return a value between 0 and 1. So I'm going to comment out what we currently have, and we are going to follow the instructions that they give us. And it's going to need a new line. So I'm going to Command C and copy that for the red switch, and then we have to modify it for each of these switches. So this should be green. Reference the green slider. This should be blue and reference the blue slider. All right, let's see what happens when we run it. Are we feeling good? Oh, one of my buttons dropped off. I need to change that. So I'm gonna drag all of these, oops. So they're not falling off my screen. Okay, I'm gonna try that. There, now they're appearing. So now we can adjust each of the colors. And we can do color mixing. Looks good. So we are ready to begin part 5.